And we're back, folks. Chris Waters here with Julian Garrity, creative director of The Crew, one of the new games announced at the Ubisoft press conference on Monday, and one of the new games here causing a splash at E3. Julian, welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much.
Is your mic on? Let me just double check that. Yeah, flip that little switch. It'll be better in a second.
Check 1, 2.
There it is. All right, we're in business. All right, Julian, The Crew. You guys unveiled it on Monday, live stage demo. Very nerve-wracking.
So, you know, actors say never do any movies with kids or animals.
Okay, yeah.
We, game developers, should never do live demos. We're taking so many risks. But it's part of the fun of doing it. I mean, the whole team was super, super excited about showing it live. One live demo, okay. 4 live demos at the same time and
simultaneously all coordinated together.
It's a nightmare.
You guys acquitted yourself pretty well, but for those folks who didn't catch the demo on Monday during the press conference, lay the groundwork for us. The Crew, it's a racing game, but it's a lot more than that.
So, this is the thing. I mean, racing games, there are crazy good quality racing games out there.
Yeah.
Forza, Need for Speed, these are my heroes. I mean, love those games.
This whole show is silly with racing games, you know, primed to take advantage of next-gen hardware and all that cool stuff.
Exactly. So, you know, what can Ubisoft do to propose something that's a little bit fresh for gamers? First thing, our environment, the whole of the USA.
The USA is pretty big.
It's pretty big.
Just the whole thing, so I could go coast to coast?
You can go coast to coast. But,
nice.
that's a mini mission. So that's not going to be something, on the principal path, if you will.
Sure.
So coast to coast is not just interesting, or the whole of the U.S. isn't just interesting because it's a massive area. It's interesting because it's super varied. And it really has iconic cities, countryside, marshes, snow-capped mountains, desert dunes, all of these different terrains, which mean different ways to drive your vehicles. And that's really what we wanted to do, is to have one game that proposed all of this variety.
And speaking of variety, the cars we're seeing on screen now, sort of fall within the bounds of your standard kind of street racing car, but during the demo, I seem to recall, some real chunky wheels and just, real creative or really much more divergent chassis and car structure.
Absolutely, and that's something we're going to see later on. We've just finished an illegal street race in New York, but that's not all that we have in the game. Variety means that we can go and do something that's completely off-road. So this second segment was featuring Black Hills, which is a national park in the States, and it's just pure discovery. So there's not a huge amount of pressure. It's just driving around with a friend, finding collectibles, finding skills. Skills are 20-second challenges, and there are thousands of them in the world. And this sort of environment, not many games have that sort of variety. And so the customization question is super important because you're going to have to be able to customize your vehicles to go over all of these terrains. So the chunky wheels, the big body things, those are essential for pure off-road, endurance races, or takedowns where you need something that's super soft.
Wait, you need to muscle the guy out.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this was Las Vegas, outside of Las Vegas, and we're driving a performance car that needs to stay on the road versus the ghost of a dirt car. And you see Las Vegas down the hill?
Okay.
We could drive down there. And this, actually, you could drive from New York, the street race that we saw, to Las Vegas over here.
All the way to Las Vegas. I see some epic cross-country, races in the future here from The Crew. But let's talk about races. There's different varieties. You've mentioned, different types of competition. But I'm looking over here on Twitter, and one of the questions from Gary Henderson that I think a lot of other people echo is the sort of discoverability of those, or how you get into one of those race situations. If you're driving around and 8 people say come together, you engage in a challenge, you stumble upon. What happens when 20 people come together? What kind of scope are you guys scaling up to?
So this is the exciting thing about this project for me. It's not only do we have this massive environment, but the entire game is a persistent online world, which means that the environment is living around you. The cars that you're racing around, they could be AI, but they could be other players. So that creates something that's truly surprising all the time. And challenges can be created on the fly like that. You can recruit people to do things cooperatively with them, or you can compete against them. Now on the screen there, you see the customization system where you can strip the whole of the body away and build it back up with big tires, with small tires, with whatever you want. Now this vehicle is one of the raid vehicles that we discussed, which is off-road, pure off-road, based on Paris-Dakar. So there aren't crazy customizations. These are all based on real-life designs.
Okay.
So, you know, we're staying in the realm of the possible.
And now, okay, it just shifted away, but like that little Paul, you have, you know, you have a crew. Let's get back to the title here. We saw four guys, four players racing together. What does it mean to be in a crew, like with a, you know, say we meet up online, are we in a crew just because we're near each other, or have we chosen to be in a crew together?
You choose to be in a crew with each other. So it's you have a friends list, and if your friends are online, you crew up with them. Okay. And that means that you have a set group of people that you can do the entire game, all of the missions, all of the races, all of the events, cooperatively. Just like this takedown mission. This is a co-op mission. So one of you succeeds it, everyone succeeds it. But where it becomes exciting is the competition aspect. Of course, the person who's going to do the most damage is going to win the most points, is going to get the best parts, is going to get the most experience. And so it's co-opetition, if you will, for those missions.
Now, question from the Twitch chat from the Spars, wondering about drive control, and you know, with such variety within the game, what sort of feel are you going for from a pure racing perspective, from a handling perspective?
So it very much is action driving. So it's not simulation, it's not Forza, it's not Gran Turismo, but we didn't want it to be too twitchy. I found that action driving recently has got to a point where it's so fast that you lose control, so it becomes Wipeout. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted speed, thrills, but with precision controls at the same time. Of course, every type of customization, on-road, off-road, and racing cars for circuits are slightly different. So you're going to have a lot of different experiences of driving in there.
Very cool. So we've talked about competition within the crew. That's sort of, you want to edge out your buddies, but you're still all striving towards the same goal. Folks in the chat wondering about player versus player direct competition. Of course, that's going to be in there. Give us a taste of what kind of variety we'll see there.
We're going to see it just now. We did a little tease for it at the end of the playable demo, where we see one crew, this crew that we see now, which are American muscle cars, versus European sports cars. In the game, there are 5 factions, and of course you're going to be able to choose a faction, crew up with other members, and then face off. We're not going to talk more about it at E3 a little bit later this year, but that's a big part of the game.
And speaking of big, people want to know, I can't attribute that question to just one person because so many people are asking. You said it spans the United States, and we saw a glimpse of the map there. You know, you had the Rocky Mountains, you had the coasts, now we're obviously down south in Miami, up in New York. There it is, almost as if on cue. Just how big is this world? You know, I'm not sure exactly what kind of metric they want. Do they want square miles, or do they want, like, how long does it take to drive from coast to coast? What can you tell us about that?
So, 2 things. I think the first thing is everybody's played Grand Theft Auto 4. Liberty City is about the size of our New York. But we've got Chicago, we've got Las Vegas, we've got Los Angeles, Miami, and, you know, 10 other cities there. So it's big.
It's big.
Coast to coast, depends on what car you're driving.
Sure.
If you're driving a smaller car, if you're level 1, it's going to take a long time. But we asked the guy on the...
Stop at some sites along the way, you take a detour off-road.
That's right. If you're going for the collectibles, it's going to take a long time. But we asked a guy with a top-level Lamborghini to drive coast-to-coast last week, only using highways, and it took him about an hour 45.
Really?
We asked another guy on the team to do it with an off-road vehicle, super high-level off-road vehicle, 2 hours and a half going over the mountains and stuff like that. So it's a big game.
Yeah. That's pretty exciting. I really just, that idea of just setting off and driving. You know, that's one of the things about open world games that we see in other genres, and I've talked about with other guests, is that kind of giving you things to discover, giving you a reason to go off the beaten path. And you've made mention of little skills, stuff like that. Can you just elaborate a little more on what an example or two of that might be?
So skills are little challenges that we have everywhere in the world. There are about 1,000, a little bit over 1,000 of these skills peppered around the world. Each one is a different type of gameplay. So we have about 7 types of gameplay: slalom, gates, precision gates, jumps, and you have collectibles as well. So there's always going to be something to do. And those skills last 20 seconds, so they're short gameplay bites. But of course they're going to add to your experience, they're going to add to your cash pile. Yeah. So it's a real MMORPG experience as well.
Yeah, and finding that, you know, might give you the incentive to just go over that one more hill, to go around the bend. Yeah,
that's right. I think we've all gone through open world games where we're collecting every last thing and doing every last activity. And this is what we're really proud of as well.
Very cool. Some people curious about the next gen sort of aspects of the game and functionality. No question more important than this one. Can you upload your picture for a licensed photo for identification?
Yeah, that type of thing is awesome. I mean, seeing your face and your friend's face in the game, I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I think it is. Vix in the chat, wondering about damage to the car.
There is a damage model. These are licensed cars, so we can't go full-on burnout with them. But there is an extensive damage model there.
Now, is that just cosmetic damage, or will your performance suffer a little bit if you take a hard one in the front quarter panel?
Performance is affected, but ever so slightly. It's just an encouragement for you to drive well.
Excellent. Julian, the crew, you're saying massively multiplayer. We've talked about you know, like this world being connected to other people while you're playing, while you're driving. How does that manifest? I mean, if it was, you know, we've seen MMOs, and I'm getting a picture now of, you know, town square crowded by 100 different characters, all names on top of each other and stuff like that. Obviously, that would cause disaster in a car game. Yeah. How do you where are you guys? How are you managing that? Where are you drawing the line in terms of how many players are going to be able to run across each other and stuff like that?
So, in any particular gameplay bubble, if you will, there'll be a set number of cars. And it'll never be too much for you to manage. So it'll be just enough for you to create challenges and be able to drive and enjoy yourself without the streets being completely crowded like rush hour in Los Angeles. That's not what we're going for.
Yeah. No one wants gridlock when they sign on to their... I mean, you know, driving through countryside, that simulates kind of a real pleasure I might have, but sitting in traffic?
Not so much.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
The questions are coming in furiously in the chat, and I mean that not angrily, but just a lot of them. Customization is a big factor, and we saw a brief car build there with, you know, you saw the chassis, the frame, the engine, the insides, the outsides, to use the technical term. How deep does that customization go?
I love customization, and I think it's really important for an MMO to have a very extensive customization part to it. Our reference here, I'm not going to lie, is Need for Speed Underground 2, okay. The original Xbox PS2 game, which was really impressive in terms of the customization. What we're doing is that every single car is a 19-piece puzzle. Some of them are performance parts, some of them are aesthetic parts, and we're giving players a free hand on changing any of those elements, so they can really stick out from the rest. In terms of customization as well, we have 3 really distinct categories: street, off-road, and circuit. So within those categories, you'll have different levels. So for example, off-road, you've got dirt cars for dirt tracks, and raid cars for pure off-road. So there's really extensive customization, stripping the body away, tuning those performance parts in the engine, and then putting everything back together again. It's really fun.
And speaking of tuning things for specific surfaces, one of the things people are wondering about is the weather systems, and, you know, how extensive is that, and also what kind of customization can you, I mean, You got snow tires. Like, do you have any customization that that weather affect the driving surfaces and stuff?
Absolutely. So all the terrains have different properties which will affect handling. And you do have snow-capped mountains. You do have areas that are going to be bathed in sunlight and other areas that are going to be overcast and stuff like that. But they'll be limited to areas within the map. So it's a dynamic night and day cycle, but the weather cycle is locked to different places.
Okay. Julian, I think we could keep asking you questions about the crew for the rest of the day.
I can stay here all day.
You know, we got chairs here, but we also have other games, folks. Oh, you're hydrated. You're ready to sit.
I'm good. This is as comfortable as I've been at the show, so I'm happy.
All right, let me just get one more then before we let you go, or before I kick you off,
all
unfortunately, because we got other games to see. People are wondering about, you know, in terms of campaign, is not necessarily a word that, you know, applies in a traditional way to a large open world MMO racing game, but what kind of motivating factors do you have external besides the general, like, I want to level up, I want to customize my car, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So one of the things I was, you know, concerned about is the whole of the US is intimidating. So how do we segment that and give short-term, medium-term motivation gameplay loops? So we've divided the map into 5 areas: Midwest, East Coast, West Coast, Mountain States, and the South. And each one will have a story. So there's a story-based campaign that you can play cooperatively that will take you from Detroit to New York to Miami to Las Vegas to Los Angeles. And we see that more or less as a tutorial for the multiplayer game. It's a tutorial that lasts 20 hours, but it's a tutorial.
All right, Julian, the crew, lots of excitement about it here at E3 2013, but when are folks going to be able to get their hands on the wheel, going to get into this massively open world that you guys are crafting?
Exclusively next gen, Xbox One, PS4, high-end PC, early 2014.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Julian, for coming on. The crew, ladies and gentlemen, hope we got a bunch of your questions answered, and I'm sure you have a lot more. Stay tuned to GameSpot.com in the coming months for more on the crew. And for now, we're heading over to the Capcom booth and see what's going on over there.